Hello my friends, in this video we'll be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and no GED match, but we're going to look at some ethnic calculator results of a Xiong Nu individual from Mongolia. Let's find out a little bit more about this sample. So it's a male, his mitochondrial lineage is N9, and his Y-DNA, it looks like is R1A. It's actually the Indo-Iranian branch of R1A, it's R1A Z645 Z93. Unfortunately, with my trait predictor, the most precise I could determine for him is R. He doesn't have any relevant calls on the R1A. I think he does have some relevant calls on the Z645 branch, but you cannot score that if you don't score R1A. So because of that, unfortunately, the most precise subclade my trait predictor was able to determine for him is R. Kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. But we know he's R1A Z645. And from that, the subclade is Z93. So he's belonging to the Indo-Iranian branch of R1A. In terms of the time period when he lived, it looks like he lived in the Iron Age, and where he lived right here in Mongolia, in this coordinate. This is where the DNA sample is from. Let's go ahead and explore what he looks like, what his ethnic calculator results. I think I should start with the ethnic calculator results, so let's start with that. I'm not going to show you his results with like other ethnicity calculators. You can generate them if you want. It's all free. You know, the file is in the description of the video. I'm just going to show you the results with trait predictor. So the closest to him is Mongol individual, Das001, followed by that is Jomon from Japan, followed by that is Iron Age Tibetan, followed by that is Mongol ERD001, Mongol BGR0. So he's quite similar to Mongols. He's quite similar to modern people who live in this region. And for the two-way mixture, the closest mixture to him is a mixture of Chinese plus Turkic UGU001. So a mixture of Chinese and Turkic seems to be very similar to what he is. The second closest mixture is Mongol plus Jomon. And the third closest mixture is Tibetan plus Mongol. Definitely very interesting. So he's quite similar. He lives right here, and he's quite similar to the modern inhabitants of Mongolia. That's all I can say. I mean, he's not like a West Eurasian, right? He's not a Sub-Saharan African. He's not a West Eurasian. He's clearly an East Eurasian individual. So that is quite apparent. Let's look at what he scores for the Nashakot calculator results, what he looks like. So it looks like he's got darkest brown eyes. There is 96.7% likelihood of that. Definitely very dark eye color. Pretty much no likelihood of any eye color lighter than brown. Even for brown, only 3% likelihood. So most likely he's got darkest brown eyes for sure. It looks like he's got black hair. Once again, 99.999% whatever likelihood of black hair for him. Very improbable for him to have any other hair color other than black. For skin color, looks like he's got light brown skin. That's also very... all of these predictions are very precise. There is almost no chance of any other phenotype besides darkest brown eyes, black hair, and light brown skin. There is pretty much no other phenotype he possibly could have. For hair texture, looks like he's got straight hair as well. That is also quite precise. 89% is a big number. So he's got 89% likelihood of straight hair. Likelihood of wavy or curly hair is pretty much nothing here, and there is no likelihood of kinky hair at all. So he's definitely got straight hair. It looks like he does not have BEH2 or BEH3 or BEH1, but he does have heterozygous genotype in BEH4. No surprises here, because even if you look at this little chart that I show on the top, you can see that BEH4 is inversely correlated to all the other blue eye haplotypes. So him having heterozygous genotype in BEH4, although it is rare and interesting for sure, it makes sense in the context of him not having BH1 or 2 or 3. Alright, there's snipper-free eye color classification chart. For snipper-free, you can, copy those genotypes and paste them in there. I'm not going to do that here. Takes too much time. Let's see the phenotype oracle for him, what that looks like. So the closest phenotype to him looks like this, which is kind of, I guess, a Mongol or Chinese phenotype. Followed by this, which is, I think, more of a southern, Southeast Asian phenotype. Followed by this on the third, which looks like, I guess, like a stereotypical Japanese phenotype. So he's quite similar to various East Asians. And for the two-way mixture, for the two-way phenotype mixture, it's a very high-quality file. So you see these phenotype mixtures are going to be quite good. He's getting modeled as a mixture of this plus this, 50% this plus 50% that. For the second mixture, 50% this plus 50% that. Third mixture, 50% this plus 50% that. So he's quite, I guess, East Eurasian in his ancestry, but he has a little bit of a Native American like admixture here, because he's scoring some Native American groups for the phenotype oracle. I guess in terms of his phenotype, he resembles natives a little bit, hence why he scores them in the oracle. All right, let's go ahead and see what he scores for the biomarkers panel and his predispositions to various biomarkers. Looks like he's got above average levels of vitamin D, definitely really good. Above average levels of LDL cholesterol, which is not really good, not unfortunate for sure. Below average levels of HDL cholesterol, which is also unfortunate. Below average levels of glucose, which is good. He's got average level of hemoglobin, which is really good. He's got very high blood pressure, right? So he's got a predisposition to very high blood pressure. That's for sure unusual. Like that's an unusually high score. It falls. Actually, it falls even above elevated. I don't know if it falls. It falls on the border between elevated and high blood pressure, which is really crazy. So he's got some predispositions to having really high blood pressure problems. It looks like he does not have any risk variants for hemochromatosis, and he's got typical level of iron in blood. Looks like he's got a below average level of 6 hormone binding globulin and spot on average level of red blood cell count in blood. All right, it's pretty good. So his immune system is fine, but the only thing he really has to watch out for is the blood pressure. That's what it looks like to me. So let's look at the polygenic risk scores and see what he scores for those. So he's got a average risk score for leukemia, average for vitiligo, slightly above average for myopia, slightly above average for primary biliary cirrhosis, slightly below average for stroke, spot on average for male pattern hair loss, very high score for atrial fibrillation, slightly below average score for deep vein thrombosis, quite a high score for bipolar type 1, 1.8 times the average for bipolar type 1, right? So he's got a high score for bipolar type 1. He's got a slightly high score for schizophrenia as well. But that's relative to Northern Europeans. Once again, Northern Europeans have sort of a protection from psychotic illnesses. For type 2 diabetes, he's got average score for that. For Alzheimer's, average score for that. For multiple sclerosis, pretty much average, spot on average score for that. I don't really see any problems here aside from the blood pressure in this file. 1 risk variance for breast cancer at 24, really good. 12 risk variance for testicular cancer at 22, really good. 1 risk variance for celiac disease out of 12, really good. No risk variance for GSS, really good. 9 risk variance for Crohn's out of 26. That's unfortunate. 9 risk variance for Crohn's out of 26 is crazy. So we're gonna have to look at the Crohn's section and see what he's got for the Crohn's section. Most likely these 9 risk variants are not going to be in any important variations, but we still have to check. For Reifenstein's, 0 risk variance for that, really good. For Parkinson's, 7 risk variance for Parkinson's out of 38, which is kind of unfortunate again, but we can't really fact check that. We can't really see where these are. So he really has to watch out for Crohn's, and he has to watch out for, I guess, blood pressure. Okay, so for results for mental health section, it looks like he's got warrior genotype in both COMT and MAOA, so he's definitely got less dopamine in his system, quite quick rate of dopamine breakdown. He's got higher number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain, and it looks like he wait, let me see for the 5-HTTLPR. Does not have long form 5-HTTLPR, so he's got a short form 5-HTTLPR, which leads to a slight increase in the risk of depression. What's interesting about this result actually is for the FGFR3 gene panel. This is something I just noticed. I wasn't looking at this previously. He's actually a carrier for he actually carries a risk allele for dwarfism, which is kind of crazy. You know, dwarfism, like, in case you don't know what that looks like, let me show you what that looks like real quick. It's like this type of nonsense. So he actually carries a risk allele for that. That's crazy. I'm not sure. I think it's one of those variations where it's not dominant, where you gotta have 2 risk alleles to actually develop the trait. But he is carrying a risk allele for dwarfism. All right, that's crazy. For autism and mental health, he's not carrying any other alleles, but he does have one. For autism, it looks like he's got a genotype that predisposes to higher odds of autism. Quite interesting. And for OXTR and the empathy gene, even though he has some genotypes which increase empathy, such as this one, for example, the overall predisposition is still to lower empathy. So he's got slightly below average level of empathy. Okay, for Hemochromatosis, no risk variance for hemochromatosis, really good to see. I know we wanted to check Crohn's, right? So we wanted to check Crohn's. Let's scroll down to Crohn's. Maybe I'll talk about some of this stuff too. For facial morphology, he's got East Asian genotype in EDAR, so he's definitely got some East Eurasian facial morphological traits. Shorter mid-face length, intermediate odds of protruding nasal bridge, smaller nose size, nose pointing up, kind of typical for East Asians, right? Like nose pointing up, smaller nose size, shorter mid-face. Actually, I don't know if shorter mid-face is an Asian thing, but it looks quite typical for East Asians, and he's got slightly thinner eyebrows as well. No micropenis. Once again, neither of the two variations for micropenis. He doesn't have any risk variance for micropenis. That's really good to see. Impaired muscle performance, likely sprint or likely endurance athlete, right? No fat gene variance in FTOs, RS99, 39, 609. So it's kind of crazy how he's scoring so high for the blood pressure, but he doesn't even have any fat gene variance in FTO. It looks like he's got fully East Asian genotype in this variation of EDAR, but looks like heterozygous genotype in this variation of EDAR. So there is actually maybe some European facial traits in his. Even based on his genotype in EDAR, you can say that there is probably some European facial traits that he has. And it looks like he's got slightly below average risk of heart failure due to beta blocker medications. All right. Slightly increased risk of cannabis-induced psychosis. All right. And for albinism, it looks like he does not carry any risk variance for albinism. He has one risk variant for familiar Mediterranean fever. Kind of interesting. He's not a Mediterranean at all, but somehow he has a risk variant for that. We wanted to see Crohn's, so let's scroll down to Crohn's. Okay, so for Crohn's, he's got lower risk of Crohn's. Yes, so him scoring 9 risk variants for Crohn's, none of them are in the most important variations, so he's still good. For APOB gene panel, he's got 4 APOB risk variants for hypercholesteremia, right? So he's kind of in this region right here in the olive green region, where there is a little bit of a risk, but it's still for the most part normal. For example, I scored 2 risk variants, he's scoring 4. But also you have to keep in mind that this file is a lot higher in quality than like a typical MyHeritage file. So he's gonna be scoring 4 out of a larger number total relative to like a typical MyHeritage result, like mine, for example. For rare diseases and traits panel, it looks like he's got this genotype which increases the risk of ankylosing spondylitis, whatever. And he does not really carry any risk variance for anything else. Yeah, that's pretty good. Alright, for an androgen receptor gene, it looks like he's got typical genotypes, higher odds of baldness. And for male pattern hair loss, it looks like he's got some genotypes for increased odds of male pattern hair loss, but also some genotypes for reduced odds of male pattern hair loss. Typically, East Asians and people of East Asian ancestry will score lower for the male pattern hair loss panel. But for him, if we look at the polygenic risk scores, I think he was scoring average. Yeah, he was scoring spot on average. So he's actually got, relative to East Asians, he's got an increased risk of male pattern hair loss. Typically, they will score less. And hold on, let's see, what else can I talk about here? Canavan syndrome, 0 risk variance, HIV and AIDS panel. Looks like he's got protective variants from HIV, which is really good. Protective variants here and here. Both reduce the viral load in HIV. However, he also has this genotype, which leads to increased susceptibility to AIDS and higher HIV viral load. Very, very unfortunate. For muscular dystrophy myopathies, it looks like he does not have any risk variants for muscular dystrophy myopathies. Or adrenoleukodystrophy, no risk variants for ADL either. Really good to see. For color blindness panel, he's got 2 risk variants for color blindness in OP and 1SW, so he is actually a little bit predisposed to color blindness. Is it enough to say that he's colorblind? No, not really. I can't really say that there's a high odds of him being colorblind. It's just based on his genotype here. But I have never before seen anybody score 2 risk variants for color blindness before. I don't think I've ever done a sample that scored more than 1 risk variant for that. So that's definitely something to watch out for. For FTO gene panel, it looks like he's got no fat gene variants, yep. He does have heterozygous genotype here, which leads to an increase in the odds of obesity, but he's really got no fat gene variants in FTO. For syncope, based on 6 S&Ps, his risk score for syncope is pretty much exactly spot on average. For bio traits panel, looks like he's got 2 copies of the hunter-gatherer CTLCL1 gene variant, which leads to a reduced ability to process carbs and sugars. He's got shorter sleep duration, which is definitely very interesting. I don't really want to talk about any of this here. For blood group panel, let's see his blood type. Yep, so his blood type is actually type A. Type B is also quite possible. 28% likelihood of type B, but most likely it's type A. 69% likelihood of that. Type O is, I guess, sort of possible as well. 1.8%. It's still a chance. And type AB, I would say, is completely out of the question. So he most likely has type A or type B blood type, but more likely type A, like 2 times more likely type A than type B. Well, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover about this individual. All I wanted to say about this specific person. Him having an allele for dwarfism is definitely very interesting, like unusual, unexpected. But anyway, thanks for watching my video until the very end. Leave a like and subscribe. And I want to remind you that you can download this file in 23andMe format from link, which is in the description of the video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.